I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. Hassan Latif founded the Second Chance Center in Denver in 2012, and he serves as its executive director. It is one of the leading reentry organizations in Colorado, and if it's successful in meeting the needs of its clients, maybe that's because it's led by somebody who knows those needs firsthand. Hassan Latif left prison in 2006, determined never to go back, and just importantly, he wanted to do whatever he could to make sure that other people would also not have to go back. He wrote a book called Never Going Back, The 7 Steps to Staying Out of Prison, which has been described as a survival guide for people coming home to their families and communities. But sometimes, as we just heard, it's just not that easy. Sometimes there's no home to come home to. Hassan Latif saw that any program that was serious about reentry would have to address the housing needs of formerly incarcerated people. Safe, desirable, affordable housing is a challenge to find anywhere, and I'm willing to bet that Denver is no different. Mr. Latif found a unique way to solve that problem, and I'm sure you're going to want to hear about it. And so I'm going to stop talking, but while he is presenting, I want to let people know that we've got pads of paper on your tables, and there's pens there. If you've got questions, we're going to spend some time at the end of his talk, and he's going to be doing some question and answer. So as we start to wrap up, we're going to have some people going around and collecting those questions. So without further ado, Hassan Latif.
Okay. I want to talk to you about fear, and I want to talk to you about possibility. All right? I spent the first 15 years of my incarceration in court every single day. I'm not exaggerating. I was fighting a case or appealing a case every single day for 15 years. I went to the Colorado Court of Appeals 7 different times, Colorado Supreme Court 3 times. I went to the feds 3 different times. And every time they found some new and imaginative way to smash me. And here's the thing. My whole goal was getting out of prison. And the way that I was doing, I was pointing fingers at everybody who had done anything that I deemed to be incorrect, wrong. I had the nerve to have some indignity about the fact that I was gotten in the way that I was. So after this 15 years, one day I'm in my cell, and I'm Muslim, and I'm praying. There's a informal part of the prayer called dua, just supplication, where you get your beg on to God. And I couldn't think of anything to say. I couldn't think of anything to ask. I was like lost after 15 years of every kind of scheme and every kind of writ and every kind of approach. And I heard myself say, you know what I need. It's like this day I kind of gave up on the idea that I really knew what to do with my life. And what I did come up with as well was they might have got this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, but they got the right guy because I was running amok and I wasn't going to stop. When I changed that focus from outward to inward, that's when things started to happen. And in the course of about 2.5 years, I found myself with an opportunity to come back to the street. And like some folks who are laying up in prison with thinking of wonderful ideas about how they can come back to the community and give back, do something impactful, I wasn't one of those people. When I went to prison, Ronald Reagan was president. When I came out, George Bush was in his 2nd term. I didn't know what to expect. I was committed to 3 things that I felt I had what it would take to follow through with. 1, I wasn't going to get high. And that had started for me at age 5. I wasn't going to commit anything that resembled a crime. And still to this day, I'm a black man in America who will not even buy a bootleg DVD. So I'm pretty serious about that. Huh? Yeah. And I was going to work hard. The rest of it that's happened over the course of these 13 plus years I've been home has just been a matter of staying committed to those 3 fundamental things and managing opportunities as they come about. So I was blessed to get a job with an agency called Turnabout after about a year's worth of an audition. And I got my first chance to do some case management work. And over the course of about 5 years, what I saw people doing was cycling in and out of the penitentiary. And they would usually say the same kind of things to me. Hassan, everything was going great. I had my own place, was making $20 an hour back with my kids, and then like this miraculous thing just happened to happen and the bottom fell out. Well, I knew it didn't happen like that. People start to compromise even strong, disciplined approaches over time. And the thing that bothered me the most was that the Department of Corrections expected the recidivism rate in Colorado, which was 50% at the time, and it's still 49.6. And the folks I worked for seemed to accept it. I had some problems with both of those things. I thought some things could be done a little differently, maybe get some better outcomes, but I didn't have the confidence to step to the people who had given me an opportunity to work and tell them they should be doing something different, even though I knew they should. It was that fear that kept me from moving forward. Now, if you had asked me at 5 years old and asked me the same question at 50, what are you afraid of? I would have answered in the same way. I ain't afraid of a thing. I just clean that up for y'all. Usually when I go inside, I don't clean it up at all. But this was a lie. It was a lie I told myself. It was one that fed my self-image. The fact of the matter is that everything about my life was fear-driven. Afraid of what somebody would do to me, what somebody make me do to them. Afraid of being without. Afraid of being found out. All these kind of things, fear-driven. I still had that going for me. That was taken out of the equation when 3 board members came into the staff meeting one day and said they were closing our program in 4 days. This is a program that was up and running for 25 years. Most people panicked. I was at a place in my life where I asked myself, what does this really mean, as opposed to thinking that it's all bad? What does it mean to me? Now, it was about 75% of my income. At the time, I was an addictions counselor, so there was some work that I could do, but what? I came up with 2 things. One, I had started writing a book 4 years earlier, hadn't written a word in 2.5 years. So I said, finish what you started, dude. The second was, you think you know how to do this better, stop being scared and just do it. Just keep that in mind. Because as I filled out the forms for the Secretary of State's process of establishing a nonprofit, I couldn't hit the submit button. My wife was working in the office at our apartment, in her office at home. I called her in the living room and I showed her the form, and she looked at me like, what was I waiting for? I said, you really think I can do this? She said, sure. I hit the button. Now, this is somebody who walked 18 years down with me. That moment was still fearful for me. Like, can I really do this thing? Now, going back, I'm going to take y'all back. About 8 years into our sentence, we were sitting across from each other in a visiting room, a little table about this size. She was telling me all these wonderful things about myself. She told me I could be an author. She told me I could be a counselor. She told me I can be happy and have a regular life. She told me I was beautiful. I bought that right away. The rest of it, I didn't have no frame of reference for it, especially that part about being happy and having a regular life. That's not something that I could refer to in any part of my past as a frame of reference. But the thing was, I trusted her. I knew she loved me and she had my best interest at heart. I couldn't see any of that, so I decided to trust her vision until I could develop one of my own. This is something that we ask our folks to do at Second Chance Center. When we call what we do, some of our work, role modeling possibilities. And we ask people sometimes who are unable to envision what life can be different, just to kind of follow a process and trust it and see what happens. So what happened was, I started this entity, and for the first year and 13, 14 months, it was what I called a mobile unit. It was in my car. People always laugh. It was a pretty nice car. But I had work boots in the trunk. I had resource material. I had this and that. The first meeting I took, because I was fronting like I had an office, it was at a place called Pizza Fusion, which was a restaurant run by the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. Beautiful restaurant. And I took a meeting with a friend of mine named Leanne Wheeler. And I was concerned about the ability to kind of move this thing forward without resources. Like many of you involved in the nonprofit entities, y'all know what it's like. She told me, just work on the vision, he'll provide the provision. And that made a lot of sense to me, and I believed it. And that's been the driver for the last 7 years at Second Chance Center. We haven't aggressively chased grants. We've said no to money that would have caused us to compromise our approach to this work. I call what we try to do is maintain the illusion of autonomy. So the first sub-grant we actually got on was the Department of Labor grant, and I was able to bring on 2 people. The first person was Sean Ashi Taylor. He caught a life sentence when he was 17 years old, the first day he ever pulled the trigger on a gun, pointed at someone's house, killed a kid his same age. I met him when he was inside, 18 years old. The only person I had ever met inside that was devastated by his crime, not by the fact that he had a life sentence. He wrote Governor Ritter after 21 years and told him the kind of things he was doing inside, which was about gang disengagement and teaching English as a second language, not to get out. He was trying to get right. And he told the governor, if you let me come home, I'll do similar work. If not, I'll keep doing it here. The governor made a courageous move and commuted his sentence. That was 9 years ago. The second gentleman was Adam Abdullah, who's our mentoring coordinator. Sean's our deputy executive director. When I met Adam, I was working for that other place. And he was kind of whited out like I am now, 65 at the time. And I thought it might be challenging trying to find him a job. So I asked him, I said, brother, what kind of work are you looking for? He said, I'm not looking for a job. I just finished working 33 years and 3 months for the federal government. Straight Fed time. All he was interested in is getting back home, spending some time with his kids, his grandkids, and his great-grandkids. But he had a stack of certificates like this, including 2 associate's degrees. And I thought, what a waste. If I ever find something he won't consider a job, I'm going to offer it to him. So it was the 3 of us, cumulatively, 75 years of incarceration time. So as you can imagine, we were under a pretty big microscope. People were wondering, what are these guys up to? I mean, I would have been wondering the same thing. The benefit of being looked at that closely for us turned out to be that not only did they see the work we were doing, but how we were going about it. At the time, there wasn't a lot of encouragement, as you can imagine. We didn't have a lot of resources, so we became a resource hub. We vetted every place we would send someone to make sure that when they went there, that what was supposed to be there was offered to them, and that they were received with some sort of respect or some semblance of dignity. And then we just sent people where we thought they could get their needs met. This kind of process grew until I hooked up with some folks at Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. Some of you may have heard of them. Christy Donner is their ED. I was on their board at the time. And in 2014, we pushed a piece of legislation that made it mandatory for the Department of Corrections to allocate a certain percentage of their budget to community-based entities doing reentry work. As a result of that, we had a very uneasy relationship to start with because they felt as though their budget had been hijacked. And it had been hijacked. Some people say they don't take government dollars. We were like resource rescuers. If we didn't take it, it was going to go into the same black hole that $1 billion this year is dedicated to Department of Corrections in the state of Colorado. Let me say that again. $1 billion. 4 entities were funded through that first legislation, and we were supposed to get referrals from the Division of Adult Parole, medium to high-risk folks. When the program came online, WAGES is what it's called, work and gain education and employment skills. The Division of Adult Parole refused to refer anyone to us. It didn't matter. We exceeded our numbers without them ever referring anyone to us. We sent people back to their parole offices. Why? Because people, let me just tell those who haven't been to prison, I'm going to tell you a secret. It's not really a secret. But when you're inside, we know who's coming back to the penitentiary even before they catch a case usually. Huh? Because we hear what's going on and we know where it's going to end up. Well, the opposite is true as well. When anyone's in the community doing anything relatively noteworthy, particularly if it might have some impact on those still inside, people applaud that. They hear about it, they talk about it, they were coming to us. They were looking for us. As a result of that legislation, we also got access to every penitentiary in the state. So whereas when I began by myself, I used to have to beg my way into halfway houses, offering all kinds of services pro bono just to get in the door, begging my way into penitentiaries that I lived in. This legislation gave us access across the board. Fast forward today, we're a staff of 20, 10 of whom are formerly incarcerated persons. We got 130 years on staff. Nobody can come to Second Chance Center and tell us anything about doing time. Please. Also, they can't tell us about transitioning out here because we got about 85 years of on-the-street time on staff. So we kind of have figured some of these things out. Someone asked me in the legislature a couple of years ago, because that bill that I told you all about, in Colorado, when you pass a piece of legislation that has a financial tag attached to it, there's something called a sunset period. So before this bill is either defunded or refunded, there's an independent audit that takes place that comes back to the House Judiciary and informs them whether or not the monies were spent appropriately, whether the outcomes of what were expected, so forth. When we came up for sunset review on that House Bill 1355, sitting next to me was the director of the Division of Adult Parole testifying for the bill, because it had been established over the course of those 4 years that it just made sense to work with community. Our recidivism rate has been under 10% for the last 5 years. You can't say no, you can't deny those numbers. We share databases with the Department of Corrections and the Division of Adult Parole. We can't fudge this. They recognize that. They expanded the program. They extended it 5 years. Now there are 18 organizations in Colorado being funded under the same legislation. All rural parts of the state. Thank you. Here's this thing, and I appreciate that, but not for me, for my folks. Sometimes you hear people talk about empowerment, and they talk about it like if you could lay your hands on people like you're empowered, you're empowered, you're empowered. This is not a revival meeting. Empowerment, we believe, is something people have to claim for themselves and lock onto that. And the best we can do, those of us who are in this healing, service, provision business, the best we can do is create an environment where that kind of thing can happen. So this is an example. When we come to our folks, because I was asked by this legislation what the secret sauce was for Second Chance, and nobody had asked me that before. And what I told them is what I believe. And that's that the whole provider-recipient power dynamic, we reject that. As Second Chance said, we understand that we're the stewards of resources and we take that seriously. But our folks don't have to come to us with their hat in their hand to get helped. That's not who we are. Also, we understand a generality. Now, usually they say when you speak generally about a group of people, you're in error. And I believe that. That having been said, I must say this anyway, because these people are my people. Most of our folks have felt apart from, as opposed to a part of, most of their lives. So when I say we reject the provider-recipient power dynamic, what we choose to do instead is partner with our people. So we tell them, the better you do, the better we're going to be able to do. And this is not smoke, this is the truth. That's a perfect example. And when we came back and told them how the legislation went, and they needed to understand that it's because so many of them have come out, handled their business, not reoffended, reintegrated with their families, paid their taxes, that as a result of their behavior and their conduct and their accomplishments, 14 other entities are servicing people in parts of the state they may never get to visit. That's empowering, to see yourself being a part of something like that. You know what I'm saying? Here's this thing about fear, because sometimes it keeps you from going forward. About 3.5 years ago, because housing was our biggest challenge. Let me just tell you, in Colorado, the job market is great. I haven't seen it this good in 13.5 years that I've been home. So that's not an issue for us. Anyone that's physically able to work, we're going to be able to find them work. Because we spent the first few years of our establishment going out to industry and employers and actually promoting our folks. Not just the tax credits that you could get for hiring a felon or the money you can get for bonding someone with a felony conviction. No, we promoted their being in the halfway house or them being on parole and having to take UAs. We promoted that as a plus, especially in the construction industry. They got people falling off scaffolds every day. We were guaranteeing that our people were probably going to be clean. That was attractive. So we were doing this kind of thing for some years. Now we don't have to do that anymore. They calling us now and telling us when they need folks. And we have folks who are in positions now that they can hire other people from Second Chance Center. This is the thing. When we send you out to get a job, you don't have to come back all grateful and bowing and scraping. We know you happy. We happy for you. What we need from you is to do a good job so when something opens up, your boss will step to you, say he needs somebody. You'll call us because you know we got somebody. If we find housing for us, you don't have to come back, shine our boots, clean our cars. But what you do have to do is be a good tenant and a good neighbor. We put the onus on our folks to keep this thing moving. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. So this housing thing was a big challenge for us as well, the biggest. And we were sending people like the Department of Corrections does to motels up and down the strip. And actually, we're in Aurora, Aaron. We serve the whole Denver metropolitan area, 6 counties, but we're actually located in Aurora, which is a city just a little bit to the east. But they put folks in motels where you can open up the door at 11 o'clock at night and be confronted with everything that ever triggered your worst decision in life and think that that's somehow accommodating. So we were sending people there as well because we had very few options. We were sending people to shelters. Some of our folks cannot stay in shelters. It's not because they're better than that. It's because they can't endure that. It got so bad in Denver Metro that quietly and unofficially they relaxed the association piece. For those who don't know, it used to be, and still is in most parts of this country, if you associate with somebody else on parole, you could get sent back to prison for that and nothing else. It's so bad they relaxed that. So what happened as a result of that, you had folks opening up their private properties and putting as many people with felony convictions in there as possible. I see that 10 minutes. You sure you got that right? Anyway, putting as many people as possible. So maybe 6, 7 people in 2-bedroom houses. And we were doing the same because we had no options. And about 3.5 years ago, someone was murdered in one of these places. We had 3 clients living there. Thank God they were all at work and not involved. But I go to the scene, and it happened in the kitchen. The owner took me in the basement. There was a partition that didn't go all the way up to the ceiling, about that far from the ceiling. 2 bunk beds on either side, wooden bunk beds about 8 inches off the ground with penitentiary mattresses on them. And it was filthy. I asked him if it looked like that when he moved people in. He was all incredulous, like, yeah, why? Well, the why was it looked worse than the kitchen where somebody caught a hot one to the head. I left there thinking, 1, these people need to be out of business. 2, we can't send anybody there anymore. So we started going in the community ourselves and saying, if you don't want to rent to felons, then rent us the property on a master lease, and we'll put our own folks in there. And we started with a 1-bedroom condo that had a loft to it. And we continue to get properties like this and furnish them with donations from community. While this was going on, someone came to me with the idea of permanent supportive housing. I had never heard the concept before June 4th, 2016. And went through a process of training over a 5-month period to get competitive, to learn how to be competitive in this tax credit game. I don't know if many of you know about it, but it's pretty competitive. And we submitted an application on June 1st, 2017. Everybody said, of course, no one gets tax credits on the first go around, and your population isn't really like a basket of puppies. But we did get awarded. And, well, yeah, we got awarded, and we set out to build a 50-unit permanent supportive housing development. It's called Providence at the Heights. Thank you. It's 40 1-bedroom apartments and 10 2-bedroom apartments. We kept 1 a guest unit because we do a lot of family integration work. And we wanted to have a guest unit in case a mother or father brought a child to visit a parent and didn't want to share the domicile, or maybe an older child or teenager not really feeling their parent yet. We wanted to have that kind of a safety net. And 49 of those apartments are also vouchered by the Division of Housing. We asked for 49. We were awarded 49. That's just, we talking about possibilities, right? You know what we're talking about? Well, I didn't think that was possible, and a lot of other people didn't, but it happened. Let me just go really quickly because you're going to show me 5 minutes in a minute, right? A couple of things that's happening, and I want y'all to understand this. This is not this. This is an acknowledgement for my folks. About 4 months ago, Governor Polis's office called me and said the governor was interested in putting me on the Community Corrections Advisory Council. I said, does he know who he's asking to do this? And his assistant laughed. Yes, Mr. Latif, he knows. So that was the first gubernatorial appointment. Governor Polis signed 9 pieces of criminal justice reform legislation into law this year in Colorado, and he came to Second Chance Center to do that. This is another thing that we told our folks they were responsible for. One of them was the returning of voting rights to 11,477 people with felony convictions. We passed the ban the box, both in jobs and in college applications. We're very proud of those kind of things. We had, up until that point, we had 8 pieces of legislation that we were responsible for, had a hand in, and pretty happy about that. Just recently, last month, the governor called again and asked me to apply to the Executive Clemency Board, and got that appointment. Last Thursday was the first day that we sat down and looked at the first 30 applications because he's trying to play catch up. And one thing about Governor Polis, for those of you who don't know, I think it's cowardly for governors to wait till they're on their way out to do what they should have done when they realized there was an injustice or somebody had enough. He's doing it in his first term. And to put someone with my background in that seat, one, I think it recognizes the need for that kind of a voice, but it also, to me, is a very courageous move. And just on a personal point, I had a friend, a dear loved one of mine, who I knew was in prison for murder he didn't commit. I'm telling y'all, I knew that he was in prison for a murder he didn't commit. 30 years. As of last week, November 8th. His name was the first one on the package. For these last 13 and a half years, as my life has been progressing in these wonderful, blessed ways, I've been aching for this person, not knowing what to do, not finding any kind of recourse for him. And this happens. I walk into a mentoring group at Second Chance Center after this announcement was made and hit the news. And I come in, and the ladies and the guys, they start applauding. I'm like, I appreciate that. But y'all need to understand the reality. If it wasn't for you out here handling your business, if it wasn't for me being able to point to your successes, the man wouldn't even know my name. So those of you who are in this audience and working with folks who have directly impacted, empower it, make the space available for them to empower themselves with the knowledge about how they can really move in this industry, in this arena. If you ask me, if I thought any of that kind of stuff was possible, we broke ground on Providence at the Heights on January 4th. It was 4 months later than the date we intended because we ran into a lot of community opposition to the project. That NIMBYism. Everybody they acknowledged the need for housing for folk, but not here. The day we broke ground, it turned out it was the 13th anniversary of the day that I walked out of penitentiary. So when you talk about possibilities, I want y'all to understand what you think is impossible in Michigan right now, dead that idea. It just hasn't happened yet. People need to take a look at and give a thought to what different looks like, because what's been established isn't working, and nobody can argue that it is. And if I hear one more time that the system is broken, I'm going to be less than diplomatic about how I respond to that. Because it's not broken. It's operating exactly how it was designed. And it's a diabolically ingenious business plan. And it's time for it to be dismantled. And I don't want y'all to think that it's not possible here, because somebody would have told you the same thing about Colorado just 7 years ago. So please, I'm going to leave some cards here. If you see me, you want to talk to me, please. I ran out of time, but I got a cell phone number. You can hit me up. You can email me. If there's anything I can offer, it'd be my pleasure. It'd be my duty, actually, to offer that help. So I appreciate that. And I'm open to any kind of questions, and you can ask them any kind of ways. So don't feel constrained by political correctness or anything else. I know I'm overboard, but thank you so much. Thank you, family. You got something for me? If you have them written out, or if anybody has them, you can yell them out. I'm all right with that, too. You're gonna walk the mic around, Evie? You're solution focused. I love that. Excuse me? Oh.
Sides of the room. Here you are, young man.
Hi, thank you
Hey.
for coming. What would you say to someone who said, who had a stigmatized opinion about incarcerated folks? Like, they shouldn't have done that then. Why are we helping them now? Because that's when I try and talk to people about that. That's sort of the thing that I run into. It's like, well, why even help them? Because they, it's like they made their mistake. Why are we doing this now?
I've gotten a lot of that over the years.
That was a really inarticulate question. I'm sorry.
I'll tell you, one of the things when we first started doing this, and I told you we had this big microscope on us, we really tried to avoid the community. We didn't do interviews. We didn't go out in the general public. It became clear pretty quick that in order to do what we needed to do, we had to have the community support, not just financially, but their support. And one of the things that got past some of what you're asking about is pointing to the commonalities about the folks that are inside and those who have never been inside. Because most people don't know that the penitentiaries in America are dumping grounds for the mental health arena. And there's not a family in America that hasn't been touched by mental health illness or substance use disorder or trauma from sexual assault or other kind of assaults. So we started talking about the commonalities, and that was the driver behind criminal conduct in most cases. And that was the beginning of opening up conversations. Part of it is just getting an opportunity to talk to people and share with people and they find out often that it's just people they're talking to. They've made some poor decisions, but they're not sociopaths. So you had your hand up, ma'am? Yes.
We have a question in back.
You mentioned role modeling possibilities.
Yes, ma'am.
So is that a little bit like the role playing that we saw this morning, or?
No.
Okay.
It's more like the peer mentoring kind of model.
Peer mentoring.
Yeah, so for our folks, we're not saying to them that you should do what we do. We're just saying to them, if we can do it, why can't you? These are the things we're doing. And why shouldn't you have those opportunities? Why shouldn't you grind that out? When we talk about the population of folks that have gone into prison, for the most part, these are people with a lot of different skills. Unfortunately, sometimes they're based in survival techniques. But we try to point out with our folks how to transfer certain skills that were negative in that lifestyle, but that are actually positive kinds of skills. Yes,
So
you weren't finished. No, you, ma'am.
I just wanted to
Sorry.
finish with this question. Dream maps. Have you heard of that?
No, please.
There's a group in Arizona called Atlas Justice Center, and they do mapping, dream mapping, and that's something that can be done inside prison as well as outside. it's similar to just creating a board with your journey on it and imagining where you're going, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I wondered if your role modeling possibilities and that might fit together.
Well, we haven't tried that, but what we're incorporating now, we're part of a group called the Tech Innovation Network. And what we're working on is incorporating virtual reality into our mentoring and some of our other care managements. Because we call our folks care managers. We don't call them case managers. Our people have been in cases all their life. We want to emphasize the care. But that's a new thing that we're incorporating. We're always open to trying to find better ways to do what we have to do. Yes. The brother in the red in the back. I'm sorry if I'm pointing my. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
I'm sorry if I'm pointing my fingers at
You're
you.
okay.
I was trying to help you out. My bad.
Yeah, so my question is kind of just want to hear a little bit about what your impressions are about Department of Department of Corrections reentry efforts and kind of where it's lacking and what it could benefit.
Well, in Colorado, they were absolutely lacking. And we have a community corrections system in Colorado that's funded by the state, but it's really kind of controlled by county governments. They have a budget of $87 million this year. We just, as a result of Denver City Council voting not to renew contracts with Geo Group and Core Civic, for those who don't know, they own private prisons. They run some of the detention centers down near the border. They chose not to renew those contracts. And as a result, it just put everything into a tailspin in the Denver community corrections in particular. So 6 halfway houses were liable to lose. These were contracts that were renewed without opposition year after year. And just to think about it, you got entities that own private prisons, own halfway houses, own ankle monitoring companies, own UA companies. That's like expecting a drug dealer to run a rehab program. Where community-based organizations like mine, our folks have to succeed for us to survive. These entities, people have to struggle and or fail for them to be profitable. They need to be out the business. So even though it threw us into a panic in Denver, and we got about 300 panic calls the very next morning after the city council's ruling, I'm glad that it happened because we're not stuck anymore. We got to do something. And that's what we're struggling to find a way out of that situation now. But DOC, a lot has changed in the Department of Corrections. Dean Williams is now the executive director. He was sworn in one day, the beginning of this year. The next morning, he was at Second Chance Center. This impressed me because it emphasized his willingness to work with community and his commitment to that. Now, the Department of Correction has changed drastically in the last 6 months. They actually have a touring group of actors that were going between penitentiaries, but next month they're coming out to the University of Denver to perform the Christmas Carol. And these are folks not with sentences 6 months to release. They're bringing these folks out of Sterling, which has 4 levels, 3 of them close to max. So that's pretty phenomenal. And the thing about it is, we're stressing the responsibility that. Oh, I thought that was me. Oh, there's a picture of Providence at the Heights right there, y'all. Yeah. Yeah, so we got a time-lapse camera out there because I thought it'd be pretty cool at the end of it to show it going from dirt to finished. And even though the neighbors were less than welcoming to us, actually, even after we won our appeal at City Council and got the right to go ahead with our bill, we held good neighbor meetings because we always wanted to be neighbors and not invaders. So one of the suggestions for from the neighbors to the south, which are residences, private residences, was that we not put any windows on the south side of the building. I'm like, apartments with no windows? So our response to that is big ass windows. Yes. So DOC is doing a lot better as far as reentry because now they have the community that they've engaged in partnering with, and that's made the difference.
Evie?
Yes, I got a question, but before I get to the question, I really appreciate you all. I'm a returning citizen myself.
Welcome.
Did 12 years, got off of parole June 20th of this year.
Welcome
Actually, the June 20th, yeah,
Welcome home.
of this year. And the question is a comment, really a question in terms of vision.
Yeah.
Currently, I work with one of the largest integrated mental health system in the entire state of Michigan. It's called Team Wellness Center. Started as a certified peer, and I'm now a housing specialist working with the permanent supported housing
Right.
unit or department. But there's in Detroit, and I don't know if you've ever been to Detroit, there's such a need not only for the homeless population in Detroit, but the returning citizens like myself, okay? It was very difficult for me because of the barriers, the criminal background, the so-called 787 laws. But despite that, I was already determined, even before I left prison, and I was connected to Team Wellness because the director of the housing and employment portion came to Jackson Prison. I was in the reentry program, and they had a vocational fair. That's how I got in touch with Team Wellness. So I'm just happy to say that I'm still here with Team Wellness. This is my housing supervisor here, Ms. Ada Hall.
Okay.
And this is an employment specialist, Ms. Rachel Lee. And Detroit, we need help. We need help in terms of providing housing for returning, and for the homeless population, but my passion in particular, returning citizens like myself. And I really applaud you guys, all of you guys from Michigan. You know how it is. I lived in Muskegon. I was in prison in Muskegon, so I know.
Well, here's this thing, brother. When we're blessed with opportunities, not just to come back home, but for somebody to trust us enough to give us an opportunity, we got to take that serious. We got to grind like we used to grind when we was trying to get money and trying to get high. All right? And I don't know any dope fiend that ever went to a drug house that had yellow crime scene tape around it and police outside that didn't go someplace else and look for what they was trying to find. So we run into obstacles, we just can't let it be an obstacle. We got to be responsible with every opportunity that's given to us. Because I'm going to tell you, people are waiting to point fingers and say, hey, I told you. I told you. And once, can I get just like 2-3 minutes? Can I get 3 minutes to explain something to you all? Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't mean it. But our population is accustomed to doing the kind of things that just hurt themselves as much or more than the general community. I was on lockdown in a penitentiary I lived in for 10 years once, and I had a pair of tweezers, and they were really good tweezers, so I know they must have been stolen from the medical department or something. But I was sitting there looking at my feet. I never had a pedicure. I decided I'm going to give myself a pedicure. I'm going to work with the little cuticles and stuff. So I started digging in the inside back of the big toenail. And when I first started digging in the corner, I mean, it was a little bit painful. And then there was some blood as well. But I started thinking about stuff, and my mind was wandering. I didn't really pay attention anymore to what I was doing, but I kept doing it. And after a while, I looked, and it was curled up. The inside back toenail was curled up, and I thought to myself, these are really good tweezers. I bet I can grab that curled up end and snatch this whole toenail off. Now, it didn't sound like a great idea, but that didn't deter me. I looked down, I grabbed the edge of it, and I snatched it off. Yes, it was like that and more. So it was terrible. It was bloody and it was painful. So when we got off lockdown and I limped into the visiting room, my wife was wondering what happened, and she thought maybe I was in a fight. When I told her, she said, well, why would you do something like that? And I said, because it felt so good when I stopped. Now, that was just kind of like one of them witty banters. But here it was, 6 months later, we on lockdown again. I still got these tweezers, and I don't know how I still got them. I expected my toe to come back. I had visions in my head, like from the Wizard of Oz, when the house came down on the witch and the foot curled up. But after 6 months, it kind of looked pretty much the same. It wasn't like I forgot what happened, and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, yeah, I did it again. Here's the point. The first time I knew it wasn't a great idea, but I didn't know how painful it was until I did it. The second time I knew exactly how painful it was, and I did it anyway. That's what we say to our folks. This, as crazy as that sounds, that's what people think about you when you're going in and out. Why? And what I said to my wife that day flippantly, I found out to be the truth. It really does feel good when you stop. When you stop hurting yourself. When you stop hurting. So, if there's no other questions, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your patience with me. Thank you, brother.